Hey, YouTubers, if you're in the LA or Southern California area over the holidays, Liz, Grace, Christy, and I are talking about putting a meet and greet together and, of course, to talk about astrology. Right now, we just need indications of interest. So if you are going to be in the LA area December 29th in the afternoon and would like to connect, send me an email, funastrologypodcast@gmail.com, and we'll keep you informed of all the details. Well, it's Thursday, the 21st of November. Thomas Miller on the Fun Astrology Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to, was going to kind of think about doing Sagittarius today, but I think we ought to expand this out a little bit more because, boy, are we ever living in some interesting times. And if ever astrology was showing its hand, it sure is now. So whether you are keeping up with some of the headlines or not, or just choosing to say that's something that I'm going to set intentions and not watch the details, that's perfect. But I did want to expand on this a little bit because what we've seen right here, right off the bat, from the beginning of Pluto entering Aquarius for good for the next 20 years, we have the struggle between authoritarian control and free will. And you know how we say that planets get stronger as they either one of two things, change signs like what happened this week, or when they slow down to go retrograde or slow down to turn direct. That's when a planet is most active, and Pluto, because it moves so slowly, has been slowed down or right on that cusp for most of last year and will be for most of this year. So it's been its strongest for quite a while and will continue that way. So the day before Pluto entered Aquarius, sitting right there at its strongest, the war in Ukraine escalates. And it, to me, looks like not from what happened over there, it was more of what happened over here, which is even more disappointing. And yet, when I go back to the United States chart, I remember that the very symbolism of war is prominent in that solar arc chart right now. In fact, it's in Gemini, 2 wars. And what are we really technically involved in? And remember, in the weekly video I did, which has been very well received, I really appreciate the positive comments. But we went back to the last time that yesterday happened, and that was in 1778. That resulted in 2 wars. But here's an interesting observation. Think about what we at least know about the consciousness back then versus now. And so is the Aquarian dynamic. There was a passion for fighting for freedom, and that was in both revolutionary wars, that same theme. And then within that came the alignment of control on one side and independence on the other, fighting it out. And I guess you could say that here you see that same thing with Ukraine fighting for its independence, but I don't think it's an exact parallel. We didn't have Neptune in Pisces back then. It was actually in Virgo the last time Pluto entered Aquarius. So this time, a facade is more likely. In other words, shenanigans behind a masquerade. And that could show up anywhere. But as we look at the structure of the chart right now, Mars is across from Pluto. That's aggression. The United States solar arc chart with that conflict in Gemini mentioned there. And then also we have Saturn and Neptune moving towards 0 degrees Aries. And we've never had that before either. And then today, when the Sun enters Sagittarius at 2:56 this afternoon Eastern Time, we will have the Sun in Sag, fire, and the Moon and Mars in Leo. Mars is at 4 degrees Leo. The Moon is at 16 degrees Leo. And that's a lot of fire. That's a lot of aggressive fire. And I was thinking back of a connection between Sagittarius and war conflict. And of course, if you don't have to think too long, Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941, a Sagittarian attack. Let me just give you 2 more things, and then we're going to jump off of this and pivot. The Ukraine chart, which I have for August 24th, 1991, Pluto is conjunct Saturn in Aquarius in the 12th house in that chart. And Mars is conjunct Chiron and is opposite that Saturn and Pluto. And for the Russian Federation, which I marked December 8th, 1991, the one that Vladimir Putin is over, the same thing. That Saturn-Pluto conjunction is in the 7th, and I'm saying that that is transiting Pluto is over Saturn. That's in both of those charts. Transiting Pluto, now in Aquarius, is basically conjunct these natal Saturn positions, one in the 12th, one in the 7th. And for those of you who want to play with this, interestingly, Saturn in Pisces is about to conjoin the Russian Federation midheaven. So like I said, sometimes on this podcast we have to flip the coin and we have to look at the shadow. And I always try to say, look, we are looking at the shadow because that is part of it. I don't like to be Pollyanna. I like to be realistically positive. The coin always has two sides. And one of the things on the positive side, I would say, is that as we watch this play out, it could be a reflection of what this ingress is going to be and these battle lines for the next 2 decades. So this is a big deal. It sure didn't waste any time presenting itself. Next year, the nodes of the moon are going to change signs. So they are getting stronger now too. And of course, the north node is in Aries. But next year, the north node will be in Pisces and the south node will be in Virgo. So that's going to bring a new dynamic of more peace and more spirituality. And like this kind of shenanigan there's going to be a definite force against it from that alignment, which will also be the other side of the coin of Pluto in Aquarius. In other words, I wouldn't be surprised to see more rebellion, Aquarius, against the war machine. I hope that comes for sure. Anybody want to get that started? But I'm seeing and hearing a lot of nervousness, especially among our European listeners. We have wonderful people in all different parts of Europe, so I want to be sensitive to both sides of this. Those of you in the United States who may not feel as directly affected, remember that we have folks who are listening to this, who are brothers and sisters in this work, and who also are interested in astrology, who are very concerned right now. We know we have parents of kids who are over in Europe, and they're concerned. So we don't know what all is at play here, and we don't know what is going on behind the scenes. But here's something I'm going to just suggest and pitch out there for all of us to consider. And that is, if you read a story about this, if you see a headline, if there's a conversation, follow it with just a moment of silence where you focus on peace. So while we're in this phase of this tension, the idea is to not ingest anything without doing the offset. And I know for our European friends, this might get a little busy because you're kind of bombarded with this right now. All I'm talking about is just as simple as, for just a second here, I'm going to snap my fingers and we'll just do this together. Let's do a little practice run, and then I'm going to tell you what I'd like to do with the podcast here. Let's just go to peace real quick. And then there it is. Just focus on peace, just sending your intentions through your chakra system out to the universe of peace right in that moment. What I'd like to do is now, until we get out of this tension, at the close of all of these episodes, I'd like us to do that together. And we're going to start today, where we just take a pause and focus on peace. So do it now. Thank you for playing with this. I think it's going to make a difference for all of us. See you back tomorrow.